Hi everybody, and welcome back to another Look Back review. This time we're looking at a game that didn't have the best launch back in 2019, Anthem. However, after purchasing this online for just £3.98 during a sale, I had to give it a go. I loved the Mass Effect trilogy, and although I'd heard bad things about the game, I couldn't imagine it was anywhere near as bad as people had described. So let's dive in and see what the legendary Bio Ware team had in store for us. I just want to preference this section by saying the source of the majority of what I'm going to tell you is from a great journalist called Jason Schreier. He covered the full development of Anthem from the perspective of around 12 developers who worked on the game, and his full article will be in the links below. The game started development back in 2012. A small team led by Casey Hudson wanted to create a new IP and set out a goal of something like Iron Man but less cartoony. For a setting, they liked the idea of a dangerous planet with constant natural disasters happening all the time. They compared it to the Bermuda Triangle of space, a planet that had strong gravity and pulled in ships and other dangerous creatures, resulting in a cocktail of chaos and danger. The story would be something along the lines of your ship has crash-landed here and now you have to rebuild it and try to survive. Because of the strong gravity and violent wildlife, you would need to wear a strong exosuit to go out and explore the world, gather resources, and use these to improve your suit and base. As you upgraded your suit and base, you would then be able to stay out for longer, effectively rewarding you by allowing you to then go out and gather more resources. This was to be the baseline the gameplay loop would be built on. From the start, multiplayer was a core element of the game. They wanted something where you would go out on a mission with your friends, complete a narrative objective, fight through a load of monsters, and then return to your base with resources in tow. However, after around 18 months of work, their lead, Casey Hudson, left in August of 2014. He wrote in a letter to the higher-ups that the foundation for the game had been established, and it was time for the game to move into the next stage of production. And this is where it all started to fall apart. The biggest hole created when Casey left was that no one person had control of the project, and it was left to many higher-ups to decide major game decisions as a team. This led to lots of different opinions being thrown at the development teams at the time, as they all wanted to see their ideas come to life. A lot of developers said that no one person had a full vision of what the game would be, and this is one of the most frustrating parts of development. The management team would often go into meetings to establish key parts of the game, like should you be able to fly? Who are the enemies? What is the lore of the world? All very basic things developers need to start making the geography of the world, creating missions, designing enemies, and well, everything else. But when they would disagree, nobody was there to make the judgment call. Developers said that when this would happen, the meeting would just end, solving nothing and wasting more time and resources. What then followed was years of indecision from their management team, effectively halting all progress at the time. There was even infighting from the 3 different studios that were working on the project. Some teams thought of themselves as the brains of the project, working on BioWare's next big game, so thought of the other teams as purely support and not as equals. This caused tension between the studios, which added to the game's issues and caused constant miscommunication and internal confusion. The game spent years going around in circles, apparently resulting in some mechanics such as the flying being added and removed around 17 times before the game actually came out. Not only this, but the engine the game was being designed in was Frostbite, which was terrible and described by some developers as being full of razors. A lot of developers said that something that could take a few minutes to fix in a different engine could take days in Frostbite. The game engine just wasn't built for the type of game they wanted to build. But this is the one and only thing their developer EA said was mandatory, so it could not be avoided or changed. The first major turning point for the game was the big reveal trailer at E3 2017, and this is the one I remember as it stood out from a lot of other games that were shown off at the show. BioWare's new game, a massive seamless open world, cool exosuits with customizable weapons and abilities, a busy hub area full of amazing looking NPCs walking around. It looked almost too good to be true. And the funny story was, that's exactly what the development team were thinking when they saw it. A lot of the team hadn't seen the demo before E3, but on the plus side, the game looked like it had finally established a vision. This is why some of the development team said the game only really started full development in the last 18 months of the game's development cycle. Compared to the last few years of unfocused work, the teams at all the studios started to focus on what needed to be done, and worked hard to get it done. Over the next few months, a lot of staff members started to get burned out, feeling overworked and stressed, and it led to a lot of them taking stress leave. Some developers described it as an epidemic that would run through a team or department like wildfire. Sometimes employees would come back, sometimes they wouldn't. A lot of the teams felt constantly understaffed, working longer hours just to get things working in an engine that felt like it was working against them. Even veterans of the Bio Ware team began to leave. The stress of trying to get a game out on time was just too much. And although some of them had been there for over 10 years, they just couldn't see it getting done in time. Only when the original visionary of the game, Casey Hudson, and another veteran from the Dragon Age series, Mark Durham, came to work on the game in summer of 2017, did the game start to turn around and take shape. It wasn't easy, but they had a new focus: finish the game. Whatever it was you were working on, your goal was just to finish it, a developer said. This resulted in a lot of planned game mechanics getting cut from the final release, with the attitude being that they could just add it back in a later patch. They had even put in intentional brick walls into the game, like the tombs, a list of mandatory tasks you needed to complete before you could continue with any story mission. A deliberate tactic to stretch out the game's playtime and make it feel like there was more to do than there really was. However, the launch of Anthem was a long time ago, and although the game went through development hell, the team did make a game that promised to be updated and improved as time went on. So let's see with some updates if this game can reach the same heights it aimed for all the way back in 2012. So the setting for our story is a mysterious old world, full of monsters and natural disasters that prevent humans from living outside of these massive forts dotted around the world. The outside world and landscape has become overgrown and relatively untouched by modern humans. Scattered throughout the land are some massive alien-looking structures, which are said to be tools left behind by an ancient race of beings that lived here before humans. These people could supposedly control the Anthem of creation, a force that controls life, death, matter, and time and space itself. We start our journey by going out on a mission to close what's called a cataclysm, an event where space rips open and monsters start pouring out into the world. If left unchecked, this can become dangerous, and that's where we come in. We are what's called a freelancer. We're not part of any army, but more like a private security force, called in to deal with these kinds of events. As part of a larger team, we all go in to try and close it, or silence it, as the other characters call it. Unfortunately, your first mission quickly goes sideways, as you and your team realise you're in way over your head. Many freelancers die, and Halleck, your leader, insists that your call to retreat is a coward's move, and orders you to stay. Very soon after this, you take a near miss from a Titan, and both you and Halleck are injured. You escape with Halleck as you are chased by 3 giant Titans from the battlefield. Halleck is not too pleased despite the danger, but you drag him out, saving both of your lives. We are then thrown forward in time, where we appear to be working in just a 2-man team. One being us, and the other being our Cypher. A Cypher being like a co-pilot who offers advice and a special connection to the Anthem of creation. Just think of it like Jarvis from Iron Man, he plays the same sort of role. This very clever chap is called Owen, and throughout your interactions with him, he's a cheery, happy-go-lucky character who gives helpful information and context to the world and the current state of affairs. No longer going out on crazy missions, we are now just performing routine checks on sensors out in the field. As you would expect though, this doesn't go to plan. On your patrol, you come across a smaller cataclysm. We know it may be dangerous to go in alone, but our hero knows we need to silence it, to stop it becoming a bigger problem later on. Unlike the first cataclysm though, you do manage to close it, and we are then brought back to our base of operations called Fort Tarsis. As we arrive, we talk to a few NPCs, and learn a few things about the world. We learn that before the first cataclysm we were in, now called the Heart of Rage, people looked up to freelancers, and it was a very respectable occupation. However, after the Heart of Rage incident and the inability to close it, the world has become an even more dangerous place, and people don't believe in freelancers anymore. As we go throughout the campaign, we're tasked to do smaller jobs to help people inside the fort, before working our way up to visit the Heart of Rage again for round 2. Now if you're thinking, well that sounds good, but there's a lot of plot holes here, then I would agree. It's a very paper-thin plot, and if you stop and think about any particular part of it for too long, it just starts to fall apart. Now the game does start off really well. For the first 2 hours, I was genuinely confused as to why people had any complaints about the game's story. It has a movie-like opening with high-quality music, sound and visuals. The characters looked interesting and the gunplay was tight and responsive. But then it started to sneak in. Slowly but surely, the story content dried up, and I was left with nothing to do but grind specific collectibles and types of kills just to progress through the story. You heard me right. There are 5 tombs in the game which are story-critical missions and need to be completed. This roadblock presents itself after only a few hours of gameplay. The tasks you needed to complete and the collectibles you needed to find were not on your map. The only benefit was that for some of the collectibles, you would see a question mark appear on your map if you were within around 50 feet of them. But you just had to hope you happened to come across these during the missions or free play, and hope they counted towards your total, as that's right, not all of them did. For some of the other requirements for the tombs, you needed to do things like make sure you got the right type of kills, revived a certain amount of people, the sort of stuff you would get trophies or achievements for in other game. This was required to progress. But it's not all bad. Most of the game's in-game cutscenes and animations did look good and they looked polished. They did have smaller mission arcs with some enjoyable narrative that were really enjoyable to play through. The writing in some places was also surprisingly good. It's just a shame we didn't see it throughout the whole game. They do attempt to fill in some plot holes and world building with these collectible text entries. Now, I do like a game that makes some gameplay or world building optional, but to have so much information just through text entries, it felt like the developers were just running out of time and had no other ways of implementing them into the game. It was a lot of important information as well, just thrown at the player in large text boxes, which is not a fun or interesting way to find out about the world I was playing in. My main issue would be that I would complete 2 to 4 hours of gameplay with no story context or relevance, only to then be given a massively interesting story plot that established itself and then concluded in just over 30 minutes. And the most frustrating thing about it is that I liked those small story arcs. I can honestly say that I enjoyed the whole experience the game had to offer within those short windows. But then another issue arose. I wanted to make sure I picked up as many of these missions as possible, so every time I returned to Fort Tarsis, I spoke to everybody I could, hoping to be given some interesting context to the world and motivation to push through to the next mission. And some conversations with the NPCs were interesting. They built out the world a little and helped me understand the characters a little more, while giving me some story-related missions. But most of the time, they had nothing interesting to say. They just kept rotating through the same 2 to 3 animations while talking to me about health and safety, or something equally as boring. I also noticed that they would name drop all the time, and most of the time I had no clue what they were talking about. Seriously, sometimes the conversations just didn't feel like they made sense. The game's hype for the story were high. It just felt like an 8-hour game stretched over 40 hours, full of filler with a healthy amount of padding and small talk. The story beats felt rushed, with long stretches of shallow filler giving it really bad pacing throughout. There was never a steady progression. It felt just like the gameplay, very stop and start. So the gameplay loop here involves going out on a mission from your base. You would travel to an area, wipe out a load of enemies. After this, you would search for something nearby like some documents or a dead body. You would then travel to a different area and defeat another wave of enemies. But this time, you would need to be doing this while staying in a certain area while a gauge fills up, or something similar. Do this around 3 to 4 times on a mission, defeat either a last big wave of enemies or a mini-boss, and that would be it. Mission complete. After this, you would go to a results screen to see how well you did and how many experience points you'd earned. You would then go through any loot you had found and see what you'd like to keep and what you'd like to scrap. And then you could return to the fort, speak to some more NPCs willing to speak to you, join into a random mission with players online, or start a raid, but in this game they call it Strongholds. This all sounds like a normal MMO, but again, this is where Anthem's split personality starts to show. The game wants to have a single player-like story, while also wants you to have the same pacing and progression as an MMO. If the game went straight from a mission into a cutscene and then into another mission, it would be a half-decent single-player game. But it doesn't. If the game went straight from a mission into a compact mission-giving area, full of other players and free of lengthy cutscenes and story padding, it would be a half-decent MMO. But it doesn't. It results in so much wasted time as the game tries to do both. If we compare this to a game like Mass Effect, the story mattered, it had consequences, and taking the time to interact with your party or the NPCs could result in requiring new unique missions, skills, or weapons for you and your teammates. As all the consequences, interesting story and character development are almost completely removed in Anthem, the long cutscenes and long story dialogue can actually interrupt the flow of gameplay. You won't get any new weapons or abilities. They were just a conversation to get through to unlock a new yet bland mission. This is also why a lot of NPCs' interactions became very annoying, as they weren't there to push me forward. I just wanted the conversations to be over so I could move on to another person and try and keep the story moving. I just wanted to add some context to the same rinse and repeat missions I needed to go out and do. There is an NPC who does catch you every so often and talks to you about going on missions to bring the thunder, which I thought was really cool. I thought maybe this would be where I could pick up some awesome harder missions, but nope. He just wants to sell me some cosmetics for a combination of in-game and real money. And as I wanted to talk to any character I could when I got back to the fort, the fact that he kept coming up on my map as somebody that had new dialogue, it just felt like they were pushing me to buy something in their store, which eventually I did, but I did it with the in-game currency. This back and forth was even more frustrating due to the long loading screens. I sometimes had up to 4 minutes of loading between selecting a mission and it actually starting. We then had another loading screen after the mission finished and another one before we even came back to the fort or started a new mission. And yes, while getting out on a mission was a bit of a drag, once you did, you could see that this game did truly have some decent things going for it. I played mostly as 2 javelins, the Interceptor and the Colossus. Whilst the Interceptor was light and agile, I found that the trade-off for this was some very weak defences. As the main reason for me choosing this class was the cool sword and melee attacks, this quickly started to become a chore, as I would end up taking way too much damage to keep attacking from up close, so I had to rely on my guns for most of my fighting. The Colossus, however, oh boy, this was really fun to play as. Massive, heavy melee attacks, big explosions, big special attacks, and an ultimate that packed a wallop. This javelin was the reason I kept playing through this game. The gameplay loop may sound repetitive, and well it is, but the fun of throwing down a massive fist of fire or plowing through weaker enemies and one-shotting them with my shield was fantastic fun. I can't say I ever got bored of firing off mortar shots and punching my way through waves of enemies coming my way. It shouldn't have worked, but it did, and I'm glad it did. While we're talking about special moves, you will have a few options to customise your suit to your kind of playstyle. You will have up to 3 special moves you can equip at any one time. One on the L1 button, one on the R1 button, and one which is a joint press of both L1 and R1 together. Each special will have a few different options you can equip, meaning you're not just left with a variation of the same ability for each button. You can equip a special boost to your javelin with skill slots as well that vary in effect. And as you level up, you'll unlock more empty skill slots, allowing you to equip up to 6 at one time. You also get to equip 2 different guns, and apart from a few, you are able to make any class use any type of gun you wanted. If you want to have an interceptor, you can use an assault rifle and a shotgun, no issue. You want to have a Colossus that uses a sniper rifle and a heavy pistol, it's possible. After completing a mission, I mentioned you would sort out your loot. On missions, you would pick up these diamond-shaped collectibles. Each colour would represent a certain class of weapon, special or skill. When looking through them, you can either keep them or scrap it for materials to make a new weapon, special or skill later down the road. Higher class items had extra added effects to them. such as increasing certain weapons skill or base damage, increased health drop or faster cooldown rates, and so on. I found that you didn't need to update your equipment after every mission, but I did have a look every 4 or so missions to see if there was anything worth switching out from my current loadout. I never really struggled with dealing enough damage or killing enemies, so although it was fun to change things around, it was more out of curiosity rather than necessity. The gunplay itself felt very tight and very responsive. Each felt like their weights and shapes had been taken into consideration and they reacted in the world accordingly. The Interceptor felt light. Moving around the battlefield felt like I was playing as a combination of Iron Man and the Flash. The Colossus, on the other hand, felt like I was playing in the Hulkbuster. I felt sluggish, but I packed a punch, and it felt reasonable and believable. It's strange to say, but in a game with so little polish everywhere else, the control and gunplay honestly did feel brilliant. At its best, it looked like an amazing sci-fi inspired adventure, right down to the way the menus and UI were designed. When you're on the ground, the visuals are beautiful, with detailed foliage and impressive open areas. Unfortunately, it is dragged down by assets struggling to load while moving from one area to the next, and horrible pop-in when it does. As you can see in the footage here, I had constant issues with the world failing to load as fast as I could fly through it. But in my opinion, one of the worst things was just the laggy menu screens, which just showed how unoptimized and broken the game could be. Thankfully, once you were in a battle, the game would catch up with itself, and it would run well, but if a lot is happening on screen, you will notice the drop in frames and performance. Regarding the sound, I thought it was really impressive when it was at its best. A mix between slightly creepy and grand music helped to set the mood and get me immersed in this action sci-fi adventure. The sounds were all realistic and believable, with sound effects for battles and explosions being very impactful. Unfortunately, this was full of bugs, from music and sound effects dropping in and out when a lot was happening on screen, which went a long way to take me out of the experience. And all the bugs mentioned are not just limited to the open world. Even in the hub area, I had the exact same issues throughout my playthrough. It's a shame, as when it all worked as intended, it was amazing and possibly a selling point for the Frostbite engine. But the problem was it just couldn't hold a steady performance, causing everything to suffer. So what are my main points to take away from this game? Well, it's a game with many issues. The story is paper thin, the characters and areas felt shallow of meaningful narrative, and the game performance struggles to keep up when flying around or a lot is happening on screen. Having said that, the gameplay is relatively solid and fun to play through. The missions, although repetitive, do focus on the game's strengths, which means you are more eager to take on that second wave of enemies rather than getting annoyed about how unoriginal it is. Going forward, it's important to point out that Bio Ware themselves have said they're looking to redesign and improve the loot and mission structure in later patches. So if you think the game is for you, there is a chance it may improve as time goes on. If I'm honest though, I've only played Destiny 2 briefly, and I can say it does offer a much better sci-fi looter shooter experience. Or if you want to go a bit wacky, Borderlands is an excellent alternative, one that I can personally recommend. I mean, I got this game on sale for just £3.98, and I'm still struggling to recommend it over any other game. If you really do like the look of the Javelins, and if you can pick this game up for say £10 or less, then maybe it might be worth your time. But otherwise, I think your money would be better spent elsewhere. Hi guys, thank you just so much for watching. It takes a long time to make these videos, and the fact that anyone bothers to watch them at all is kind of amazing. Just thank you so much for spending your time watching this video. If you do like it, please give it a like, and if you think any of your friends will like it as well, please do share it with them. I'm happy to discuss what I've said in the comments as well. I do encourage you to let me know your experiences with the game if you've got it, or your thoughts on buying it after this review. Again, just do subscribe if you want to hear more from me. I have of course done a few more videos in the past which will be linked down below, but just thank you so much for watching guys, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.